longest-running public affairs program. Lawmakers from northeastern Minnesota are joining us today for a recap of the week's activities at the state capitol. This is your opportunity to call or email your legislative questions and have them answered live on the air. Minnesota Legislative Report starts now.
Hello and welcome to Minnesota Legislative Report. I'm Tony Sertich and I'll be your host for the 50th season of this program. As you can see, we've returned to the studio this spring and we'll be practicing physical distancing to keep our guests and crew safe. Our show each week will feature a Democrat and Republican lawmaker either live here in the studio with me or through a live virtual connection. And since we've returned to a live format, we can once again take viewer questions either through the phone numbers on your screen or by email to ask@wdse.org. We've got excellent guests for our first show of season 50. First, Representative Spencer Igoe is one of the newest members of the House, elected last fall. He's a Republican from Grand Rapids, representing House District 5B. Welcome, Representative Igoe.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, and Representative Mary Murphy is a DFLer from Hermantown, representing House District 3B and the longest-serving woman ever in the history of the House. Welcome, Representative Murphy.
Thank you.
Yeah, great to have both of you.
It's great that Spencer is here because this is the first time I've seen him.
Yeah, it's just like great to meet in person like this, for sure.
It is.
Yeah, and that's my first question actually, is this is actually year 2 of the legislature serving under a pandemic. And so I'll start with you, Representative Murphy. How's this year going so far?
Well, it's going very rapidly and it's going very difficultly, with great difficulty. In the sense that last year we accomplished the first month before we had to leave. And I think that made a huge difference because just because we were there and then we came back. But this year I can't imagine what it's like for a new person to come and not have sat on the floor of the House of Representatives at all. Not to take the oath, not to sit. Maybe you've gotten in a couple times because you've had more representation on the House floor, but there's very rarely more than 15 or 20 people on the floor of the House of Representatives in any session. And so many of the people haven't had the opportunity to even sit at their desks and know who's their seatmate. And we picked those the same old way we always picked them, by seniority, and the caucuses decided which people had to sit in certain places because of where the microphones are and that kind of stuff. But it's so different, and having the staff, which people think we have a huge, huge staff, and we don't. We have 2 representatives, every legislative assistant. We have both caucuses have research staff, but covering all the people that we have, you have to share with, maybe 12 people with everyone. And then we have nonpartisan research staff, which really is long-term people that come in and stay forever and ever, but a lot of retirements took place last summer. And so we have new staff at every level and new workers, and it's working out fine. They're working from home, they're working remotely. We don't see them in person. We haven't met in person yet, but good thing we have the phone, good thing we have email, good thing we have everything going for us, but it's much more frustrating and time-consuming than ever before.
Great. Well, thank you. And just to reiterate what you guys said off the top, you are both serving northeastern Minnesota, and the session's half over, and this is the first time you've met in person each other. Yeah.
Or even even virtually, because you're on my committee. You're on the committee I'm going to start meetings with in April, the redistricting committee. But I don't think we're on any other committee. Yeah. And I presented bills to a committee you were on, but that's it.
Yeah. So Representative Igoe, very first year in the legislature, you have nothing to compare it to, but how's it going so far?
Right. So it's You know, like what Representative Murphy said, it's such an interesting time, and I think the thing that I've kind of grasped and held on to is that every member of the legislature is trying to figure out this virtual format right now. So I don't so much feel like a new member, because we're all sort of feeling like new members, right? And it's kind of been interesting because members of committees have started to realize, okay, if we do this thing, we work together better. If we do this, it's not so good, and we're all kind of navigating this together. So it's interesting because we're coming together in some ways, but it's also lacking because this shouldn't be the first time I'm meeting you, Representative Murphy. Like, we should have met many times before this to build relationships, because that compromise, that's how else are we supposed to figure that stuff out? And that's kind of been the biggest challenge is, you know, I think legislators, our biggest ability is to be able to communicate with each other and build relationships. And it's really hard to do that through a TV screen or on a cell phone.
Sure.
So I'm looking forward to when we can get back in person like this and be meeting with each other, especially those hallway conversations between committee.
Great, great. And so the pandemic is really overarching here, and I want to get into one of the more contentious issues around the pandemic, and that's executive orders and Governor Walz having the ability to make some decisions without the legislature. And this has been a contested topic, debated topic of the legislature. We'll start with you, Representative Igo. You know, some would say that these executive powers, if you were to involve the legislature more, that would slow down the ability to react. I mean, clearly you were talking about that right now, about that inability. What are your thoughts about Governor Walz's executive orders and the role the legislature should play?
Right, so I think where we're at right now, and you know, being a new member in the legislature and in running when these emergency powers are being put in place, my constituents of 5B would really like to see these emergency powers to be done, to be terminated, right? And the big talking point is, right, we have a legislature that's in session. Yes, there's obstacles, but most of us are down in St. Paul in the state office building working. And I think we really just want to be a part of the conversation. And I feel like when you have these emergency powers in place, it's just kind of a roadblock to stop that compromise, to stop that conversation, because we can try and have one. I can send emails, letters to the governor's office. I can try and have meetings. But at the end of the day, does my opinion really matter? And that's almost 40,000 people, right? And there's 200 other, you know, elected officials, senators and representatives that want their voices heard on both sides of the aisle. I think it's really important that we have a conversation about removing those powers and having a solution where we're all working together again, and I just see that as a major roadblock. So I'm hoping we can see that compromise, and there's been a lot of emergency declarations. Some of those not so bad, and you know, there's over 30, right? You know, an idea that's been brought up is maybe we should have a discussion about those on the House floor. Even though we're in the Zoom, you know, world, I guess you could say, at least go through each emergency declaration order and talk about, is this one good, is this one bad? As a legislature, have that conversation and really see what that could mean to bring us together and decide which ones we remove, which ones we keep, and then at the end of that conversation, the emergency powers are removed and we can get back to a state government that's ran by the people.
Great. Representative Murphy, you know, some people say a check and balance would be important with these emergency powers. What are your thoughts and feelings?
They're checking and balancing just fine with us now. I think the Minority Caucus has never been as organized as they are today. And the people of Minnesota, they want us to be reacting to the emergency, but they also want their state budget to be approved for the next 2 years. And here we go. And if we're doing emergency powers stuff, we're not doing state budget stuff. And we don't have time before May 17th to do both. And so I say the governor gets all the science, the governor gets all the materials, and the Department of Health, and we're given weekly updates. For all representatives and senators are given weekly updates, and what we get in those weekly updates are not enough for me to make a major decision on whether this emergency power should be cut this week or 6 weeks from now. I think the governor's and his assistants have been following science and have been doing this. I think the people's frustration is coming out on remove the emergency powers, because we're tired of staying home. We're tired of not being able to know what's going to happen with our economic future. We're tired of knowing when the kid, or not knowing for sure when the local school districts are going to be given the all go ahead. And now that they are being given the all go ahead, some of them are having to retract because the cases of tests are showing that more kids are carrying the diseases. But we can talk about that kind of thing, and we should be talking about that kind of thing on a daily basis with our leadership and with the governor's office. And the people's frustration is shown to us in many different ways, but I don't think we're going to be wide open. I mean, I heard the President of the United States talk about July 4th kind of stuff. I don't think it's going to be safe by July 4th, as many people think, that no masks, no this, big barbecue down in the field kind of stuff. I don't think I'm going to be ready for that.
Sure.
And I just got my second shot on Friday.
Oh, that's great to hear.
So it is great to hear, but we have lots of people that haven't gotten their first shot yet, and they have to.
Yep. Alrighty. Well, we got our first question from a viewer. This is Vincent from Chisholm, and he emailed in, and he wants to know about a bill to match the federal exemption for unemployment insurance payments, and this is dealing with state income taxes. So the federal government has exempted the unemployment insurance, and the state has yet to act on this. We'll start with you, Representative Vigo. What are your thoughts on the timing of passing that federal exemption?
Right. I think that's an important issue that we really need to be talking about. You know, it was on the House floor here last week. My caucus tried bringing up a motion to bring that bill forward. It was Representative Garofalo out of Farmington. So we could conform to that, right? In this layman's terms, what this really comes down to is this exemption is those families, those people that lost their jobs during this pandemic, they shouldn't be having to take the stimulus check that they just received to pay taxes on that. We have federal COVID dollars that are pouring into the state in the billions of dollars. We could use that right now to have that exemption move forward and give people the money that they deserve in their pocket to recover from this pandemic. That's the biggest thing we need right now is economic stability in our families. So as we move into the summer, as vaccines continue to rise, as the COVID numbers continue to crash, we can bounce back from this pandemic. And really, the quote I like to use is bring our best days to reality. That starts with unifying with the federal government on this issue to keep more money in taxpayers' pockets.
Okay. Representative Murphy, this is an issue, and I know also the PPP program for small businesses, that loan program from the federal government. Can you talk about those issues?
I'm confident that they will be part of the omnibus tax bill that passes the House of Representatives, probably in April.
Okay, great. So Representative Murphy, we're going to start this one with you. You mentioned it as well. This is the year that the legislature passes a budget for 2 years for the state of Minnesota. That's your major job responsibility as a legislature. Pass it from both bodies, get it signed by the governor. Can you give us an update on where you see that process is at? I know for viewers at home, it seems like every year that you're on Passover Easter break right now, so you're all back in your districts, and the message always coming out is, why haven't you gotten anything done yet as a legislature? Why do you wait till the last minute? And so the budget is the big deal. Can you give us an update on the state budget process?
The state budget process follows two paths, the Senate's path and the House path. And then they have what's turned out to be, and especially now during the this area, they have the omnibus finance bills from mostly each financial area, which is education, taxes, health and human services, environment, natural resources, energy, and there's a few others that are smaller. Transportation, I forgot that one. Transportation, and they have finance committees that deal with all the bills that are sent to them for that, and they pick which bills would serve the most Minnesotans in the cheapest way, and they got their budget targets last week, and this week we're on break, but the finance people aren't on break. The finance people have Zoom calls scheduled every single morning of this week for sure, and then they'll work on a daily basis, and by the time the third deadline comes, which is April, the first Friday of the first week of April, by the time that comes, those bills will have left the committee and be in Ways and Means, or left Ways and Means and be on the floor of the House of Representatives and on the floor of the Senate. And then each body passes a bill, and passes the bill or rejects the bill, and then it goes back for fix-ups if it's rejected, and then it comes back for another vote. And then when there's a passage of a bill from both places, then they have the ability to go to conference. And then it's 5 senators, 5 representatives from each of the finance areas that work out the differences. And then it's the legislative branch, or the House of Representatives and the Senate has their bills. Then they have one bill that has to pass both houses, and then it's sent to the governor, and then he decides if he's going to sign it or not. We hopefully, along the way, the conference committee has people from the governor's office there giving advice and working problems out. And so usually those go right to the governor for sign. And then the people are happy because, oh my gosh, they finished, and it's not even May 5th yet. That's a hope, that's a dream.
Sure. So a lot of steps in the process, and Representative Igo, you sit on the Natural Resources Finance Committee, so you're seeing those particular details a little more in depth. Do you want to talk about the budget process either specifically in that area, which I know is important to our viewers in northeastern Minnesota, or broadly your thoughts on the budget?
Right, yeah, so I know with speaking with my chairs in those committees here, when I get back from break here that first week of April, I'm going to see those budget proposals. We're going to kind of see what the chair's omnibus bill looks like for that. And we're going to kind of see where the funding is going to be allocated. I know these last couple of weeks, especially in natural resources, lots of meetings with the DNR, talking about if we're going to see any permit fees increases, funding moving in places, what kind of budget are we going to create? And I know we've been having good conversation. I know that my stance on all these budget plans is we cannot have any way that we're going to be increasing taxes on the people of Minnesota right now. And I think that's a message from Greater Minnesota that we're hearing very loud and clear, that we want to make sure that when we balance this budget, it's not going to take more money out of taxpayers' pockets. In natural resources, I think it's going to be very interesting. One of the hot button topics we're talking about right now is the timber industry and what happened there with the pandemic. We saw lots of loggers really go through a hard year. With the closure of Verso here just right outside Duluth, those things was really affected. And, I'm working on a piece of legislation with Representative Eklund on that to try and get loggers help. And that's going to be something that's going to have to be included in the budget, right? Is money so that the DNR can return timber permits back. So these loggers that are sitting on $40,000, $50,000 permits, stands of timber that no longer have markets. We got to fix that. That's all going to be included in this omnibus bill that we're working on in natural resources. So I'm hoping to see common sense and again, working together. I really use this platform, being here with Representative Murphy, really talk about that unity thing and compromise and just how important it is for both bodies to be working together. Also, Republicans and Democrats. Let's come together, make a balanced budget, and let's please try and stay away from increasing taxes on the citizens of Minnesota, because they don't need it. We need to come back stronger than ever from this pandemic and bring our best days to reality.
Great. Well, that's a nice segue, because Doug from Hermantown just emailed in and had a question about taxes, talking about the governor's proposals to raise taxes. Representative Igo, we heard a bit about your thoughts on this. Representative Murphy, some of those proposals that came from the governor to raise taxes, and I know your caucus is coming out with their budget and their revenue increases, not yet. So can you comment a bit on what you see coming from the governor on the side of taxes and revenue increases?
I haven't seen specific, like Representative said that we don't know what individual taxes are being spoken about very much, a license, but we do know that the people at the highest levels still are not paying as big a part of their incomes and their business opportunities as the people at the smallest levels are. And there is a chance that the Democrats are looking at those differences to equalize it and make more equitable. But I don't expect a whole lot of new spending, new taxes for the spending. Okay. And I expect some cuts. But one thing I wanted to talk about that I'm so glad that Representative brought up, and that it seems that this is a year that we recognize that timber and forestry is one of our major industries in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. Because I know in the last bonding session, in which we did pass almost $1.9 billion finally in October, but even in May or the previous year in 2019, we didn't have money for forestry in there, and it wasn't being proposed by or pushed by any major groups except for the loggers and the industry, and it didn't make a big enough sound early enough to be able to get a big or a portion of the bonding funds that they usually get. And so I'm looking forward to having a small bonding bill in the next month, and a $500 million bonding bill, which is quite a bit smaller than $1.9 billion, but we have to think about the debt reserve too. But we could spend up to $500 million and achieve that debt reserve that we could pay, and timber would be part of that, and forestry.
Great. And the bonding bill, capital investment bill, is that borrowing we do for capital investments that have statewide, regional, local significance. Representative Igoe, I know you have a few proposals in from the Itasca County area for bills like that. Thoughts on a bonding bill this year?
You know, we just have to see what the budget's all going to shake out and what these proposals are going to be, right? Just kind of to lean in on these tax increases and stuff. When you're dealing with a situation where things have gotten hard, I believe you tighten the belt, right? That means that everyone gets a little lean, we get through this thing together. And when it comes down to a bonding bill, you know, there's a simple term we like to use, you know, a bonding bill is a jobs bill, right? And maybe that is some stimulus that we could use, but we really, really need to make sure that when we're looking at all of our finance committees and we're looking at these budgets, that if we find a way, like Representative Murphy said, to get a small $500 million plan in, it's got to be done without raising taxes. It's got to be done without taking money from other places that's needed, because we need to make sure we set ourselves up good for the next couple of years so we're not struggling towards the end of this biennium. We need to make sure that Minnesotans are safe and secure moving forward as we beat this pandemic. That's the thing I really want to emphasize on. So if we can find a way to get that done, awesome. But we really need to make sure that all of our committees are balanced properly so that all Minnesotans can prosper.
Great. We have one more viewer question. We don't have a lot of time left, and it's a tax question, so we're going to try to keep this pretty tight. A viewer asked, why do they tax combat veterans in the state of Minnesota? Why are combat veterans taxed? Either of you know the history of that, or?
I don't.
Okay.
But we tax people based on their incomes.
Okay. And not necessarily how they get the money.
And the property that they're owned. For local units of government, but taxes are predominant taxes that people pay are personal income taxes, and so everybody pays that works. I don't think there's anybody that doesn't have to pay.
Okay. Anything to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just defer to Representative Murphy here. I mean, I guess I don't know too much about the issue. I mean, something I definitely should look into, and that kind of gives me something to go back down to St. Paul with and look into really what other states maybe look at combat veterans differently on a tax bracket. So something to look into, so I appreciate the question.
Sure. And so I'm a geek about politics in the legislature, so I want to bring up a topic. Representative Murphy, you're going to be chairing the redistricting committee, and Representative Igoe, you're serving on the redistricting committee. And so this happens every 10 years after the census, where they draw the lines of both the legislative branch of government, but then also the congressional branch of government. And so this is a big deal. It only happens every 10 years. You're the chair. You're new on this. Can we talk just for maybe a minute each on kind of that process and what folks should be expecting in this conversation? I know it's not going to wrap up this legislative session, but it's definitely going to be talked about through the fall. We'll start with you, Chair Murphy.
Yes, it's going to be talked about, and it is being talked about. Predominantly, we have to decide on the principles that we're going to use to draw the maps. We're going to have the ability to draw the maps based on the national census that is going to be given to us at the end of August. And supposedly it was supposed to be here by the end of April, but we're making adjustments for that, and that's why you haven't heard so much. but we will be starting our meetings in April. When the other committees close up, we will be just starting ours. And we are going to listen to voices of the people, the League of Women Voters and Common Cause and good government people all across the state are going to have open doors and open virtual opportunities to express their opinions to us.
Great. You know, I just want to say it's first off, a very humbling experience to be able to be put on the redistricting committee, especially under you, Chair Murphy, to learn this process, right? To really sit down and work as a bipartisan way to talk about what the new lines and districts are going to be for the state of Minnesota. So I'm really eager to learn all these different meetings we're going to be having and learning from the people of Minnesota what they need to create a fair system that works best for us for the next 10 years of legislating in the state of Minnesota.
Great. So 10 seconds apiece. Right after this, the governor is actually giving his State of the State address in 10 seconds each. What are you hoping to hear from Governor Walz?
I'm hoping to hear that he has a plan to remove those emergency powers, give power back to the people so we can all work together in a unified way to have a balanced budget and bring our best days to reality.
Great. Representative Murphy.
I hope he's going to tell us that Minnesota is in a good financial situation and he has a plan for going forward for education and homes for all.
Great. Well, we are out of time, and I would like to thank Representative Spencer Igoe and Representative Mary Murphy for joining us this week. Minnesota Legislative Report will be off for the next 2 weeks due to Easter and a special program. So join us again on Sunday, April 18th, when we will welcome 2 more legislators from northern Minnesota to the program. For the team at WDSC, I'm Tony Sertich. Have a great evening.